Good afternoon, Anthony Franco. How are you?
What are you doing in my office today? What
Yeah,
is
it's
it?
a
It's
very
two
strange
o'clock. What
thing
are
that
you
we're
doing
doing
here?
today. Yeah, it's I feel like we don't see each other in the afternoons really ever. So
You're better looking in the morning.
I was about to say it has not improved your looks. The afternoon.
we
My name is
we
Chris Franks. This is Anthony Franco. We're going to do something a little different, something we've been really excited about trying for a while. And we have our first subject. His name is Nick James. We're going to be
first
doing
victim.
the first victim, if you will. And Nick was a guest on our show earlier. But today, what we're going to do is ask Nick a series of
I'm
five
gonna, let me. You
questions.
know what? This is awkward. We're talking as though he's not here. He's
Yeah,
actually
let's
here.
just pretend that he's
I'm just gonna.
not
Yeah.
and just go.
Hey Nick, how you doing? Good to
the
see you again,
the
man.
looks of our podcast, like the video podcast, just increased tremendously, Nick. Nick, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Give me some piece of incredibly good news on this holiday Monday.
Since we last spoke, I became a father, so I hope that's big enough news.
That is terrific
That's
news. Give us
awesome.
this. Give us the tail of the tape. Like, what's the
Uh,
wait
my first
time?
my first child was born on Thanksgiving Day at 1 p.m. So my wife had Thanksgiving dinner in the hospital like 4 or 5 hours later.
Wow.
Thankfully, it was a healthy, safe birth. We're now 7, 8 weeks into the journey, and so far so good. Minus some sleep.
How much are you? I was gonna say, how much are you sleeping at the moment?
Decently well. He's a well-behaved little boy. So versus some of the horror stories that many other young parents experience, we are very fortunate and blessed.
Let me tell you about my
I'm
kids,
really
Nick.
confused. Has it really been 2 months?
I think
Since
so.
over 2 months since we had.
Wow. Yeah, I think it was true. It was right before Thanksgiving, and Nick was
Wow.
just about oh well, I was gonna say Nick was just about to have a baby. His wife was about to give birth because
I was about to watch.
yeah, you're gonna watch.
Be
You're
a
along for the
passive
ride.
participant.
So, Nick, we sort of started this with you in mind, this idea that you had such a fascinating backstory. We wanted to get some more kind of detail about your history, about the way that you think about the problems of startups, early stage, growth stage companies. And as mentioned before we came on, not the founder of IdeaScale, but you're an operator, and which is I do think that kind of adds an interesting perspective to this. So we talked about it before in the previous podcast, but just give me your backstory. How did you end up the CEO of this company? And you're academic. It's like if you took every degree that Anthony and I have multiplied two, I think you have more degrees.
Okay, that I'll try and respond
I
to
mean,
that.
well, I'm counting Anthony's elementary school graduation, which is pretty significant. Yeah.
Sure. So I'll break my career in kind of three chunks to lead to where I am today. The first chunk of my career was academic. I have a theoretical math physics degree, spent a little bit of time doing research in both economics and physics, never quite made it to the PhD level. Then I spent about 10 years working on Wall Street as a finance guy, private equity deals, hedge funds, investing in stocks, bonds, you name it. I invested in it. So did that for 10 years, a couple big places like Bain Capital and Greenlight. Somewhere along the way, I got an MBA at business at Harvard. And then for the last 5 or 6 years, I've fallen into a very weird job, which is I'm a professional CEO. So when founders, when private equity firms, when venture capital firms need leaders or executives to take a company that already exists, but to that next stage of success, they bring on folks like me who are, professional executives, where we come in and either turn around companies that are struggling, or conversely, companies that are doing well but have outgrown kind of their existing executive team. We help take that company to the next stage of growth. I've been now with Ideas. I'm on my third company so far where I've done this. I've been with IdeaScale now for about 2.5 years, which, as I mentioned last time, is a B2B software company that is basically a social network for ideas that has been around about 15 years. And we power amazing organizations such as Comcast, US Post Office, Coast Guard. We are basically the network where they figure out what ideas are great and what drives their future.
Fascinating. I have so many questions about your background. I'll try to limit it to just one or two. What is the difference between regular mathematic degree in a theoretical mathematics degree. Explain.
It was my understanding that there would be no math.
Okay.
So we are already getting into the math.
I'm already lost.
Okay, I've got two answers. Okay. Real math involves numbers. Theoretical math involves no numbers. Okay. Wrap your head around that for a second.
I'm already confused. So
the other, the more flippant response. So that's the honest response. The more flippant response is real math is actually useful. You can use it to calculate a tip at a restaurant. You can use it to build AI robots. You can do it for, you can use it to measure things. If you're doing into construction, right? You multiply 2 inches by 3, you get a 6-inch like ruler, whatever it is, right? Theoretical math is totally useless and helps you not to do things, but to figure out that in theory, things could be done. Now, theoretical math doesn't end up useful for about 40 or 50 years. Like for a practical example, all the AI stuff people are talking about, the math for that was figured out like 40 years ago. We knew it was possible. We just didn't have computers strong enough and big enough to do so for like 40 or 50 years.
Give me an example of a problem that you worked on when you're studying theoretical math.
Sure. What's a
he's trying to dumb it. He's trying to, how do I say this to these guys that don't know squat?
Yeah, I'm going to try not to bore you. Imagine you have a bag of really, really tiny numbers, okay? Like tiny, infinitesimally tiny numbers. And that bag has an infinite number of these tiny, tiny numbers. Now, depending on the order which you can pick those numbers out, you can get them to add up to the number 1, the number negative pi, the number infinity. You can get them to add up to anything you want. That was a homework problem I had to solve when I was in my second year in college. Like, you have this bag of numbers, prove that you can take numbers out just by changing out the number or the order in which you pick out numbers. They can add up to anything you want. Whereas you and I, we know if we had $1 and $3, we get 4, whether we had 3 plus 1 or 1 plus 4. Turns out that doesn't happen when you're dealing with an infinite number of infinitely tiny numbers.
I want to be holding a bag of infinite number of Twinkies. That's where I'm going.
Anthony is now on Amazon looking for his bag of numbers. Where do I get one of the bag of numbers? That's pretty interesting. All right, so you move on then, and you go into the more hedge fund financing, making trades. What's the coolest or best trade you ever made? You don't have to give us specifics if you don't want. Just give us kind of the hypothetical.
And I wasn't a trader in the sense of a day trade, right? That's a very different sort of game.
Yeah.
The types of firms I worked at were really investing in the long-term orientation of businesses where they were investing anywhere from 2 to 10 years long. The best investment I ever made was I discovered this company, the super complicated company. They had a nuclear business. They had a construction business. They were in every sort of business possible. And this was a multi-billion-dollar company. And they woke up one day and they realized, hey, they owed somebody else $6 billion that they didn't know they owed them yesterday, right? Imagine you woke up and you realize, I owe somebody $6 billion. Your house is worth $100,000, but you owe somebody else $6 billion.
Yeah, that's pretty much, stupid, right? That's a bad day. That's a bad day if you do that, right?
Well, maybe depends if your house coincidentally is also worth, $5 billion. Yeah, you're bad debt, but they're still taking your house, right? And that's the problem this company found itself in. They woke up one day, they realized that a $5 billion house, but they owed somebody surprisingly $6 billion. And the bank was basically going to foreclose on their house. And it was a pretty nice house. And the cool thing that I discovered was this was a super complicated, legal, messy situation. The company was operating in 8 different lines of business. They were all over the world. And what I discovered was that the way the $6 billion was owed, they actually didn't really have to pay it. And so while everyone else in the world is freaking out about the $6 billion and, all hell is breaking loose, I realized they could get away with paying about $1 billion of the $6 billion, which again, sucks, but it means the company's not going bankrupt. They still have a future. And it would just required an immense amount of reading, like thick legal documents. And again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a math guy. Reading's not my strong suit, but imagine like pouring through legal documents, SEC filings, calling up, experts and saying, wait, am I reading this right? Am I just stupid? Like, how does everyone else in the world miss this?
Because nobody else bothered to read the contract.
Well, exactly. There was a room I was in with, this is the most like eye-opening experience in my professional career. where I was in a room with about 100 other people. We were all investigating this from different angles. It was clear like 95% of the people in that room had not read the documents at all. Like 3 or 4 people, based on the questions they asked, you could tell, hey, wait, these guys are probably thinking the same way I am. They actually looked at the documents, and I probably want to go grab a drink with them afterwards so we can like have a co-investment here.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Nice. All right. So what led you? So you went to some school. What's the age? I don't know. Some school in Boston.
Do your pinky thing, Chris.
Yes, haven't.
Yeah.
I can't
believe I told you to do that.
Yeah, right. So you went to Harvard Business School, pretty good business school from what I understand. And from there, is that when you moved into being a CEO? Like it's still
no. I
being a
spent
CEO is really hard.
I spent a couple more years on Wall Street, and then, honestly, somebody randomly had heard about me and gave me a call and said, Nick, hey, do you want to come co-run a giant trucking company? And it was kind of shocking. Wall Street's it's really fun. You get to work with really bright people. You get to do really cool things. But when someone gives you a career opportunity to go run a real company and create real value rather than just moving numbers back and forth, that's much more rewarding kind of emotionally.
So so your first opportunity to operate was alongside somebody else. I just imagine, and this is those of us that have come up and learned being a CEO by making every single mistake, jumping from high finance into being a CEO is a weird and strange jump. And I would say the vast majority of people probably would not be able to do it well.
So there's a lot of aspects to being a CEO, right? You have to be good with people. You have to be able to you have to be good with people, both like as a leader, but also in motivating other people. You have to have good analytics. You need to understand the chunks of a business. And it's true, not every single finance person could make that transition. And I perhaps may have failed at making that transition. It looks like I've been successful. Again, we're, reasonably early in the journey. There's a long road ahead of me still. But when I made that jump, look, both the people hiring me as well as I had some risk that, hey, Nick is going to screw up and suck at this, right? Because I hadn't done a real job as an executive before. Conversely, what I brought to the table, the areas where I was very strong at were kind of 2 things. Number one is I understand how businesses work. I understand, how does a trucking business work versus an HR business versus a chemicals business. I really understand how businesses work. And then the second thing is and this is really silly, but I'm just willing to work my ass off, right? Mm-hmm. If I don't know something about a business or like if I don't know something about HR, I'm just going to work 1,000 hours a week and make sure I learn that. And that is, I think, a critical element to anybody succeeding. It's just, a lot of people rely on natural talent. I just rely on working my ass off.
So just an audience note here. A reminder that Nick is an expert in theoretical math. That's where he came up with 1,000 hours a week. I was lost for a second. I had to remind myself.
That's exactly right.
That does work on Pluto. I think Pluto has like a
Oh, you're right.
Lasts like
Pluto has.
That's right.
If you work
Just
on
depends
Pluto.
on what planet you're on. That's completely accurate. Okay, so I want to ask the first of our questions because this gets into the heart of the conversation, and we can explore some of the other, lessons and mistakes that you've made, and some of those key lessons that you've learned along the way. But my first question for you is, what is an unexpected belief that you hold dear as a CEO, as an executive, which most people might find strange or counterintuitive? What's the thing that you believe that when you say it, people go, really?
I have lots of ones that my wife makes fun of me for. So let's come up with something interesting.
And you don't have to do it as a founder. You heard me as the CEO. Yeah, you can do it as something else if you want.
This is going to be an imperfect answer to your question, but it's something that I believe that I'm just consistently wrong at, right?
Okay.
And it drives me insane that I'm wrong at it, which is I believe that when you explain to people what's in their best interests, they will act in their own best interests. And I've been horribly wrong on this all the time. Like when you explain to somebody, here's how you can make more money, or here's how you can be a happier person, they agree with you, and then they still don't do it. Which drives me insane, because like if somebody tells me I'm doing something wrong and here's how I can, make more money or be happier, healthier, I'll usually change my behaviors pretty quickly. I'm always wrong in this assumption about how people operate. And like, I often have to check myself that, wait, this is not how the world works. It is a fundamentally wrong assumption and a bad habit that I have.
Why? Why is it that if you tell me today that if I just simply started learned to write with my left hand, that I could be wildly much more successful, I'd sleep better, my hair would regrow, I'd become more attractive, all those sorts of things. But yet I probably wouldn't do it. Why is that?
I think two things. And again, this is me guessing because I'm definitely wrong here, habitually wrong.
Yeah.
Number one is, and just habit, right? It's hard to break habits. Even if if you know that you should be eating healthier, but you're eating McDonald's every day, it's pretty hard to break that habit. It doesn't have to be McDonald's fast food. I actually really like McDonald's, I should say. But I eat it in moderation, right? I eat sugar in moderation, whatever it is. That's number one, habits. People, if you've been doing something a certain way for the last 5 or 10 years, even if someone explains to you, hey, this is a bad habit, and you agree with them, it's really hard to change it. The second is, I think people sometimes aren't explicit in their own minds what their values or motivations in life are.
Yeah. Right? What do they really want?
Yeah. Like
the classic saying, it's easy to get what you want.
They may tell you verbally they want money. They may even tell themselves they want money, but that's not what they want. They want to work 25 hours a week. That's what they're, in their heart of hearts, they really want, even if they're lying to themselves. And I think sometimes I, take people at face value. If you tell me that you want, more sugar, I'm going to give you a chocolate bar, right? Not understanding maybe that you are, lying to yourself and me unintentionally, perhaps.
Anthony, does that ring true?
Yeah, I actually rolled over to grab a book that I'm into right now. It's called The Molecule of More. I think what's interesting about it is, let me try to summarize. I was turned on to this by my good friend Rob, and I think the reason why people don't do that is because it doesn't feed it's like dopamine. Everybody is the goal in life for us being on this planet is to regulate dopamine. And if you're telling something that's better for them, if it doesn't give them the dopamine fix, then they're not going to do it because they're chasing the dopamine fix, not necessarily what's better for them. It's a fascinating book. I do have a question for you, Nick, an extension on that. Anyway, that's my theory, right? It's because it doesn't feel good because I don't get my dopamine fix out of doing what you're telling me to do.
Right. I mean, cheeseburger gives me that immediate sensation of satiation.
It's exactly right. Do I want to work out and eat vegetables, or do I want to have whole bag of Twinkies? And I like Twinkies. There's a better dopamine fix.
Yeah.
Is my brain broken then? Because Twinkies don't give me, like, sugar doesn't give me dopamine, but running does.
No, everybody's different, right? Okay. Everybody gets dopamine from different things. Twinkies, unfortunately, that's why Twinkies are not allowed in my house. I do have a question for you, Nick. Kind of a spin-off on that, and that is, should you use your superpower of knowing what's better for somebody to manipulate them to do what's better for them?
I would not. Just as a fundamental ethical thing, and this may be a bad way to drive success in life, but I fundamentally believe I'd always just rather be honest with somebody, good or bad. Let's lay out the facts and hopefully we can arrive at the right answer. And sometimes that is in fact the least, or the path of most resistance to achieve what I want. But I'd rather, from an ethical point of view, I'd rather just, be straight.
Give me an example of a time when maybe, I'm thinking about this from a CEO perspective, but it doesn't have to be experience as a CEO, when you could clearly see a path that would ease suffering, but yet that person chose not to. And what were the ramifications on both sides?
Sure. I can give an example right now. Over the past couple of years, AI has become a big thing, right? We have AI tools for everything.
I'm not even here right now, Nick. Yeah. This is my digital twin.
We all know that's not true, Chris. If this was a digital twin, you would have made it better looking.
Yeah, I would have made it better. I would have awesome hair. That's true. Right. That's really true.
I'm actually going to try and do an interview in the future where I have a full AI avatar. So let's see if it works.
Nice. Yeah.
I'm trying to render it well. It doesn't look like me quite yet. But So here's an example, right? AI tools have become a big thing, and some of them are just buzzy marketing things, and they're not terrible. But there's a whole bunch of really powerful things out there for marketing, for writing, for sales automation, for better engineering. And some people at IdeaScale have been really effective at adopting them really quickly. And for other people, I've had to kind of force them that you have to do this, otherwise you won't have a job. And the funny thing is, some of these tools that I've pushed, yes, they force people to change how they work, but they fundamentally make somebody, anywhere from 2 to 10x better at their job. And that is really, or let's say 40% on the engineering side, maybe 10x on the marketing side. That's incredible, right? It means that somebody could either just be way better at their job and produce more and earn more, advance their career more effectively, or conversely, they could do their job working 2 hours a week and spend the other 38 hours a week on a beach. Either way, it's a win-win for them, whether they want to work more, whether they want to achieve more or work less. And yet, I've been, in some cases, it varies from individual to individual, ineffective at convincing people, hey, this is kind of good for you. Don't do it for Nick. Do it for you.
Right. It's wild because I think probably the three of us are in a camp, which I love trying new stuff to the point where I will ignore something that's working if I can try something new. New to me is just exciting and doing the same thing again and again. But there is a universe of people that sense of just disrupting what is normal and what is expected and what is routine and what is habit, to your point, is terrifying to the point where they just have some sort of mental block around it. I mean, Anthony, has that been your experience?
Yeah. My personality is the exact opposite of that. If I'm doing the same thing over and over again, I get antsy. But yes, most of the people that you tend to work with don't like change, and to Nick's point earlier, they don't like reading. And right. So
I said I didn't like reading. To be clear, I didn't say others didn't like reading. I said I am a bad reader.
Well, other people don't read. Forget about like reading. They won't read. They won't read to get smarter. I've noticed that quite a bit.
I've got a quick interjection. One of the pieces, given I build software for a living, one of the pieces of advice, or not advice, one of the mandates that we've given to our designers and engineers is they have to cut the amount of text down, the amount of instructions, the amount of, even enter your first and last name, just first name, last name. Just get rid of the words enter.
They're comments.
People don't, we know factually, all right, in the software industry that people don't like to read. The moment they have to scroll and read an extra line of text, the moment they have to read one extra word, it decrease the chances they engage with your software product. People are really lazy when it comes to reading.
Yes. Right. It's a really interesting point. But so here's the way I want to phrase this, and then we're going to get on to our next question. Even though we're a half hour in and we've only got one question.
We got
the ramifications of that, we'll call it a juxtaposition about being somebody that is willing to work and be willing to, we'll use the term growth mindset. You have that idea that, hey, I don't know about something, but that's okay. I want to go learn, and I'm willing to go learn. I'm willing to be bad at something. I'm willing to fail, because that's the way one gets better on one side. And then the second piece of that is that knowledge that you are constantly exploring and trying new things and experimenting. I think the three of us probably are all like that. That has profound ramifications as a leader, though. And I know I have screwed this up, and particularly my last company, I screwed this up because I got bored. How do you, as leaders, and Nick, and I'll kick it to you, Anthony, how do you as leaders mitigate that sense of, I really want to push and try to get people into a mindset where they're willing to learn and invest in their learning and growth and try new things, but oftentimes they just don't want to?
So at IdeaScale, the simple answer is we try and create incentives, right, for people to do extraordinary things. And people can do extraordinary things due to one of really two ways. Number one, they are just fundamentally extraordinary people and they will outperform. Or number two, they figured out a better way how to do something, right? From a company's point of view, I don't care whether you're a genius or you're lazy, but you figured out an awesome way to do something that just makes you more effective than other people. So given most people by definition are not extraordinary, if you're creating extraordinary things, it's probably because you figured out a better way to build a mousetrap. So we just try and create incentives to reward extraordinary output in whatever field, whether that be an engineer, whether that be a marketer or a salesperson. And usually that is correlated with them having done something differently than other people would.
So let's just be explicit. You're talking, you will give people financial rewards.
Financial career pat on the back. It doesn't, not everybody's motivated by money. There's one of my mentors used to say there's 4 G's that motivate people: gold, which is money; guts, just to prove to themselves they can; glory, to prove to other people that they can; and the good, like for the common good, people who just want to help humanity for no personal reward.
Impact.
Yeah. So you want to ideally touch all of those 4 pleasure centers of the brain, especially the ones that motivate any specific individual.
Got it. All right, Anthony, it's a huge leadership lesson here. And how do you think about that? And that you show up in a particular way, but that's not necessarily the way that your audience needs you to be.
You mean, you said audience, you mean the people that work with
your
you?
Employee, the people you're leading in this case.
Yeah. So incentives, I think Nick is right. Incentives work. But in my experience, incentives are sometimes easy to game. And that also means that if people are gaming the incentives, you have the wrong people on the bus, first of all. But I do agree with that people, if you want to know what a company's going to do, look at its incentive package. The thing that, I haven't worked for a company. I'm not successful in companies that are over 200 people. And the reason is because I think, you can kind of get the sense of it from Nick just being on a podcast. There's a certain energy, and I bet you that Nick's energy has more to do with the drive that his people have than anything else. Because if you have apathy as a leader, guess what's going to happen to your company? And so having an energy and a drive and moving at a pace that challenges other people to move at the same pace and keep up with you, I think has probably more impact on an organization than almost anything else.
Nick, what do you think?
I think that a leader and his or her team feed off each other from an energy perspective, right? That no matter how extraordinary, how charismatic or energetic a leader is, if he or she is not surrounded by people who have some level of energy, then you don't. The leader can't move the boat by himself or herself.
Yeah.
Right? You need energy or charisma from both sides of the equation.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. It's fascinating, and I think that really, as leaders, it is one of those really interesting questions to ask and look in the mirror. And there's no right answer, I don't think. Okay, we're going to talk about culture. And I want you to think about the culture that you have built and that you've been a part of and that you're trying to build now. If the ideal company culture was a person at the bar, how would you describe that person at the bar and what would they be drinking?
I'll start with what would they be drinking. They would be drinking probably beer, right? It's probably a middle of the line beer, not something fancy, not some high end.
Amstel Light. No, maybe
Amstel Light, Stella, Coors, something
right,
not very middle of the line, right? Not some craft 1-barrel beer.
Yeah. Right.
Very, because we try and be a very casual culture here, right? Whether you're CEO, whether you're junior engineer, we all work together. At the end of the day, we're here to serve our clients. And there's that culture where like something goes wrong. It's not pointing fingers. It's like, okay, how do we solve the client's problem here? Regardless of your title, regardless of which department, which country you sit in, et cetera. The personality of the person, I would say, is hyper driven, workaholic, kind, respectful. And I want to distinguish that versus kind. And ideally curious about why something is happening, whether that be something good, something bad, and not just curious for the sake of, practical benefits, but curious from the purpose of, hey, this is just interesting for us to know and learn from.
Anthony, we really haven't done a lot of conversations about company culture yet. How are you, even early stage, are you thinking about culture? And if so, how are there's three of you sitting around. How do you think about building culture? And then Nick, you came into a company which is wildly fascinating.
Yeah, it's
In
hard.
some cases, you needed to build or rebuild or things like that. So I want to start with you, Anthony, just early stage. How do you think about it? And then Nick, how do you think about
early stage, the company culture is almost entirely the personality of the founder. The founder really sets the culture. And I wish that wasn't the case, but it is what it is. The founder is the person driving driving what you're doing, the initiative, how it gets done. It's entirely that individual. You should write those down in order to help hire people that fit culture. But it's not like you can decide. It's like it's the same thing Nick was talking about earlier. It's like, I can want to be somebody I'm not, but you have to be honest with yourself on who you are. And that's probably what's going to paint the company culture to start. Your best
Nick,
self.
I mean, when you came in, how did you think about culture? And then how do you, even in any of the companies you've come into, how do you take stock of what's good, what's bad, what needs to change, and what you want to amplify?
Sure. So each of the companies that I'm on my third company now, each of them have been around for a long time, right? One company had been around for 2 years, one had been around for 30 years, and IdeaScale, at the time I joined, had been around for 12 years. So these were established companies with established founders. And as Anthony said, in many cases, the culture was, originated from the founder's own personality. In each of those circumstances, I think I took a more passive view towards culture, saying like, this is the situation I'm walking into, whether good or bad, but then adding on the elements where I think I excel and that are important to add to the organization. And I think there's kind of three things that I've always tried to implement in the culture or enhance in the culture if it doesn't, either implement if it doesn't exist or enhance if it already exists. Number one, I want people to, I want to encourage rational risk taking, right? Experiments. A lot of organizations don't encourage people to try new things. And the only way you progress, the only way you innovate is by trying new things. That's number one. Number two, I want people to be data-oriented and analytical. Whether you be senior or junior, I want everyone to make decisions based on the evidence and data, not because, hey, I'm Nick, I'm the CEO, and therefore we're doing this, right? That's appeal to authority.
The data I've got is my business card.
Yeah,
my business card says I get to make this.
Right. I feel that at least conceptually, like a senior person should be able to explain very rationally and logically why he or she's making a decision to a junior person when asked why, rather than it's the way, I'm the CEO or I've been doing this for 20 years, right? Those are appeals to authority and not good reasons. And often they're wrong.
Right.
And then third is an element of respect, right? I've worked in companies that have, IdeaScale was very fortunate that I walked into. It was already a culture of respect, but there's other organizations I've worked at where, some of them were old school organizations that have been around for 40 or 50 years. And you can imagine a more Mad Men-esque culture, which is certainly not appropriate, shouldn't have been appropriate 40 years ago, but definitely isn't appropriate in 2025. And so implementing that, greater respect for your peers and colleagues, than I think, some organizations had that are legacy organizations.
Got it. Is it your job as the CEO that comes into a company to manage the company culture?
That's really hard for me to answer because I think it is difficult unless you're starting an organization de novo to create a culture to explicitly create a culture. So no, I would say it's not my job because it is, I would argue it's a fool's errand for any established organization. It's like turning a ship. It'll happen over time, but like, is anyone really controlling it?
Yeah, got it. All right. Imagine your core leadership talent as a superhero. Which superhero is it and why?
Say the question one more time, please.
Your core leadership ability, your superpower, that thing that you bring to the table that you're best in the world at. I'm going to assume it's theoretical mathematics because you're the only theoretical mathematicien I've ever met. So
it probably is, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's no superhero that
I'm math man.
I guess
Watch
one of the Fantastic Fours, really is the actual only legitimate scientist in the Fantastic Four. The other, were space shuttle people.
Right.
I guess the Hulk, although I'm not jacked up on steroids. Look, my
Bruce Banner.
Huh?
There you go.
Bruce Banner.
Bruce Banner, exactly. Like Spider-Man, technically, Peter Parker was a budding scientist in biochemistry. Let me put it this way: my superpower is I'm really, really good at math, and that allows. And I don't just mean like, oh, the crazy stuff I learned in college, but in applying it to making really good right business decisions. When I make a decision, right, I'm very rarely wrong in the process of that decision. Now, the assumptions or the data that went in could be wrong, right? But very rarely is the process or the logic for why I'm making decisions wrong. And I can say that very, very confidently. Like you can poke holes. You won't poke holes in any argument I make because they're incredibly well thought out.
So
Batman. Batman.
There you go. Give me an example of a decision you made recently and talk me through your process. Obviously, with no spreadsheets or whiteboards in front of us, but what was your process for looking at the data, and are you using weighted averages? Are you using some sort of broad equation? What's your
Sure. I'll give an example from my personal life. It's semi-personal life. So I'm building a small real estate investment real estate business with whatever spare time I have. And my agent is my agent and I recently got into a friendly argument about one of the investments I was making, which is I was investing in an area that everyone in Philadelphia, which is where I currently live, thinks is a terrible idea to invest in. It's a rough neighborhood. It's, the city has basically officially said we're not going to invest in it. No professional investors, no developers, the city, everyone's given up on the area. And I said, no, we should make it. And I'm aware of all the challenges this community has. And the reason I did it was it was purely math. Like, here's how much I can invest in this community. Here's the returns on it. And it doesn't matter that it has this bad reputation. It doesn't matter that all these other things are bad about it, because the price at which I'm buying at is so cheap, and the returns that I'm getting at are so high that I'm being paid to take care. I can be paid to ignore all the other risks, right? If you're making and so it was a very funny argument where, like, the real estate agent is absolutely right in all of his statements that everyone's forsaken this community, but at the same time, those arguments are entirely irrelevant to the decision here, because that's not what the investment decision is. It's how much does it cost? How much will it return? Everything else, the reputation, the feelings, don't matter in this particular situation. Now, would I live here? Yes, that is a very different sort of set of parameters. Then you're not just optimizing around investment returns. You're like, hey, can I walk outside at night?
Yeah. What if I suddenly took that superpower of yours away? What would be left in the sense of how would that change your dynamics as a CEO? So you couldn't use math to make decisions anymore. You had to, make decisions based on gut or feel or whatever.
I don't like this question.
Okay, I'd be
such
screwed.
an unfair question. No, I want to see what Nick. I'm like, I'm feeling empathy for Nick. Like, I wouldn't want to answer that question.
Here's what I'm getting to, which is there is all of us have a format, a go-to thing to make decisions. Occasionally, there will be decisions that you have to make, Nick, where the data genuinely is balanced, where there is no right or wrong answer, and you're going to have to fall back on something else. What is that something else?
Okay, I'll give two answers to your question. Firstly, if the data is equivalently balanced, the actual mathematical right decision is to flip a coin and go with the coin. That's actually there's actually some deep theory into why that is the best decision-making process in balanced situations. I won't bore you.
Fair enough. I like it.
Just so you know, we have a rock, paper, scissors clause in our operating agreement. So
Absolutely.
It's not a coin flip, but it's rock, paper, scissors.
It's pretty darn close, exactly.
Yeah. So randomness is actually, there's a deep theory for why randomness is actually sometimes a really powerful decision-making parameter. But let's take that away. If you took away my superpower, the honest answer would be I'd be screwed. This is how I've been making decisions, and generally pretty well since I was like 6 years old when I was trading Pokemon cards on the playground and making a killing doing that. At the age of 7, I had
that was your best trade was some Pokemon cards.
It was my first. It was my first investment / trading business. But the second answer is I think I would rely on my secondary superpower, which is I have no ego about needing to be the smartest person in the room. So I can listen to other people, and whether the junior most person or a lieutenant has an idea or has an argument, I'm perfectly fine. Like, hey, I'm no longer great at math. I can't make decisions. I'm gonna let you make decisions because I am willing to listen to you.
Interesting. Anthony, what's your go-to and fallback decision making process?
I'm with Nick. I ask other people. I don't, sometimes I just don't make a decision and I just continue to gather data. Like I try to delay the decision if I don't have to make it right away. And if I have to, if I have to make a decision and I can't talk, like I have to make a decision now because no decision is a decision. Then I go with intuition. It's just what feels right. I agree with, I like the coin flip idea, but ultimately I go with intuition.
Nick, I've got there. This question is a good one, but I'm going to phrase it this way, but I'm going to follow up on it. So, what's one piece of common wisdom in entrepreneurship, operating, being a CEO, which is it's common wisdom, but it's completely overrated? That if somebody came to you and be like, "Well, you got to do this," right? It is a completely overrated piece of conventional wisdom.
There's a fun piece. I'll give a fun piece of research. So if you think about the type of CEO you see on TV or movies, right? It's this incredibly charismatic, well-spoken, extrovert, loud, booming voice, wears suit and tie. You actually look at the research, that has zero correlation to actual success and actually slightly negative. That's how you get cult leaders, not great executives.
Right, that's from good to great, right? That's Jim Collins' entire work.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, exactly. Look at I'm thinking of Search of Excellence. But yes, if you think about like, a lot of CEOs who are these incredibly charismatic, outspoken, they're the face of their companies. You actually look at the impact that they drive, and almost always their impact is either zero or provably slightly negative. The great leaders, right, the great executives, and the research has proven this out for the last 30 or 40 years, are the people who are just workhorses, who are there in the background doing the like boring, painful part of running a company. Because if you're running an organization, whether it be 100 people or 100,000 people, a lot of what your job is to manage all the minutia, all the bureaucratic stuff of keeping everyone else productive. And that means you're not on stage making fancy speeches.
Yeah, that's the fun, sexy part that happens once every blue moon, right? I want to ask the follow-up question, but I want to ask this slightly differently. You've been doing this now for how long? This
I've
is
been
your
a
third
professional
company?
executive for about 5 or 6 years now, and IdeaScale for about 2.5.
You get to go back and you get 5 minutes to spend with yourself as you are entering your first company. What advice are you giving yourself as you are becoming a CEO for the first time? What are you going to say? Hey, you thought this, but that was wrong, or double down on this one concept. What are you telling yourself?
I would say I would tell my younger or less experienced self to be more aggressive. I think I have underutilized, particularly in negotiations with third parties, whether it be business partners or M&A. I think I have tried to, have a plain clothes discussion with people rather than apply aggression. And I think I would have benefited in both my organizations as well as professionally by being a little bit more aggressive kind of earlier in any kind of negotiation or communication process.
What do you mean by aggressive?
Sure. So look, my natural inclination, going back to math, is like, okay, if you and I are doing a deal, let's lay out all the math of the deal. We both put all our cards on the table, no hiding, and let's come out to a deal that wins for both of us. Okay? That is my natural inclination is let's lay out the facts, let's bake a pie, the biggest pie possible, and then cut the pie in a way that we both make, do well for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because that is an incorrect assumption about how my counterparties often operate, that applying aggression is more likely to not only result in a more favorable outcome for us, my team, but also more likely to get deals done. Because I think a lot of people have interpreted my having a kind of plain discussion as some sort of tactic rather than, hey, this is just the easiest way to bake the biggest pie.
Right. And so am I correct in saying that for kind of a layperson, you're going to play that game? You're going to play that sort of
Yeah,
negotiating
exactly.
game a little bit
I've
more?
been bad at playing the game of negotiation throughout my career because it kind of negotiate in a way that few people don't, or few people do, which is like, let's bake the biggest pie, then we'll worry about chopping up, whether you get 60% or 40%. I think most people enter a discussion with, hey, what portion of the pie am I going to get, rather than make the biggest pie. And that
Fair
has
enough.
resulted in like less effective and often less successful outcomes.
Anthony, what would you say your answer to that would be? So if you could go back and spend 5 minutes talking, and particularly as an operator. Now, we talk a lot about being a founder, but a founder almost always has two roles, being a founder and a CEO. How would you talk about being an operator?
Instead of answering that question, because this is about Nick, I want to kind of double down on what Nick just said, and that is, Nick, what you kind of, I've been exploring this topic with a couple of folks on this notion of the difference between a builder and a raider. And it's really funny. Builders care about the size of the pie, more about how to carve it up, and raiders care about how to carve it up. And so I think that aggressive nature, you have to be that way with raiders. Otherwise, they either think, like you said, you're trying to take advantage of them because they assume you're that, like you operate, you see the world through their lens, or that it's a sign of weakness and you're somebody to be taken advantage of. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you said in that if you're playing, you have to know the room of who you're playing with before you and get and not assume that your way of doing is how who you're dealing with is going to do. I just think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
What, particularly being a CEO, it is such a hard and challenging job. Did you have any sense of, I'll use the word imposter syndrome, but were you nervous about taking over that role? And if so, why were you nervous? What was the thing that made you the most nervous? So obviously you knew finance coming in, you knew the functions of business.
So I've never been nervous from am I going to fail or succeed? Because it'll happen. Life will go on, right? I have not suffered imposter syndrome, but what has kept me kind of given me pause, especially as I'm entering a new organization, is knowing that I don't have domain expertise in what I'm entering, right? When I showed up in a trucking company, I knew nothing about trucking. When I'd shown up at IdeaScale, which is a B2B SaaS company, yeah, I'd been an investor in SaaS, right? I'd written a few pieces of simple code myself, but have I run a software company? And so there was not imposter syndrome, but certainly uncertainty about, hey, there's a lot I don't know here. And like, can I pick it up quickly enough while, still applying my strengths to drive value today, but can I learn enough about everything else so that I can be constructive in the other areas of this organization where I'm not showing up day one with, expertise?
How did you approach that? I mean, I know some people that come in and take over companies and they come in with a lot of fireworks, let's say, that want to kind of create a sense of energy and momentum and shake things up from the very moment they walk in the door, and others that spend a lot of time quietly asking questions before they make any decisions.
Sure. So I'm a mix of the two, right? In areas where I know I'm really good and really right, then I may, it's kind of hack and slash, make decisions fast because I know I'm right. I have the evidence. I've done this 1,000 times before. And like, it's not just I'm saying this because of appeal to authority. I can prove it to you. If you ask me, Nick, why are you doing this decision? I can lay it out in the math, and you may not like the outcome, but you won't deny that it's right. Okay. On those things, I move fast because there's strong evidence supporting my case. On areas where I don't know what I'm doing, then I ask others for advice. I ask others to make that decision, or because I'm not qualified to make that decision, right? If you ask me today to run a creative marketing campaign, I wouldn't make that decision. I'm not qualified to make that decision. I would look to my marketing team and say, hey, how do we make an effective YouTube video? Or how do we make an effective still ad? Because I'm not good at that, and that's okay.
what is the first week of your life look like when you come into a new company?
The first week is two main activities. Number one, meet all the important people within a company, all the heads of the divisions, all the movers and shakers, as it were. Number two, delve into all of the numbers about the company as I can. Those could be the financial numbers, every single expense item, every single revenue item. What are the metrics for the company? What are the non-financial metrics, the KPIs? Like for a software company, it is DAUs, it is average engagement rates, it is time spent on app, things like that. And if they don't exist, in which case some of those metrics didn't exist when I joined IdeaScale, get somebody to build them really, really fast, or build them yourself, or if you can't build them, get proxies for them. Like, get deep into the data so you know everything, at least at a first order level, about the organization.
What's one metric that you look at that I would be surprised that you spend a lot of time paying attention to? The non-conventional. So I understand the CEO stuff. You get your weekly report. You're seeing the cash. You're seeing sales. You're seeing expenses. But what's one metric that you really focus on that's not obvious?
Okay, this wouldn't surprise you, but like if you're running a software company, you should be really, like any software exec worth their weight in salt is looking at kind of at least these two metrics: daily average users or monthly average users, some sort of average users, and number two, the length or quality of those interactions. So it's not just how many times did somebody log in, it's did they log in and spend 30 seconds on your application, 3 minutes, 3 hours on your application.
Anthony, what's one metric that you paid attention to that maybe is not the normal thing you would hear a CEO say?
Revenue.
It's a bold statement, Anthony. Bold.
That's not the case.
That's right.
No, you'd be surprised how many CEOs do not look at revenue.
I mean, I think in the early stage, I think you're probably right. It's a lot of
I should say profitable revenue.
Yeah, that's cost acquired, things like that. All right, last big question for you, Nick, and I'm sure we'll have some smaller follow-ups. But if you had to start a business from scratch right now, $1,000, no social following, no real assets to speak of, what business are you starting? Why? And talk me through your logic of your first few steps there.
I would start a handyman business.
I like it. That's counterintuitive. Okay, why?
Okay, it's an incredibly fragmented, unsophisticated market, right? If you look at the handyman industry, whether you're looking for a plumber, electrician, somebody to install a railing, there's a million guys running around doing this. They're all like, 1 to 5 person organizations.
Dude in a truck, right? With his phone number kind of painted on the side.
Yeah, exactly. And he or she may be part of a 5-person team with an office manager, right, who's deploying people, doing quotes. But it's an incredibly unsophisticated industry, which is bad for both the people doing the work as well as for the customers. Because if I was trying to get a humidifier installed in my basement. I had to call 8 different organizations. There was no standard quoting. I literally have to hop on the phone and get quotes from any one of them, right? And then conversely, for each of them, they each have to talk to like 20 customers a day, and they're competing all against each other. So it's like deeply inefficient industry, which means that there's a lot of opportunity to create value, both for the people doing the work, so they're not driving around between 8 different clients every day and trying to convince people, hey, use my company, but then also from the customer's point of view. So I don't have to, as a customer, I don't have to hop on 8 different calls to get one quote for like a $200 job.
Why do you think it's such a screwed? I mean, because it is, and there's people that have tried to fix it, including a Denver-based company, Service Magic, I think, Service Now,
something like that.
Somebody. They were trying to be the people that sort of unified that. Why do you think it's such a hard problem to solve, and why hasn't technology solved it yet, or process or good business had solved it?
Sure. So some organizations have come around, done a little bit. Like Yelp has the request a quote feature that you can, send your job out to 10 different organizations. I would say it's 2 things. Number one is it's an unsexy industry. It is not high finance. It is not high tech. It is not where MIT, PhDs go, right? MIT PhDs go work at Google, or they go cure, disease in biotech, or they go to a hedge fund and make a ton of money, right? That's number one. It's just not a, prestigious, high fancy industry, or that a lot of people grew up saying, hey, I want to go be a carpenter. Like I grew up I actually did my apprenticeship in carpentry, right? So most people don't have that kind of background. Number two is it is a kind of really complex logistic industry. And I saw this in trucking as well, right? Like you figure how hard is it to get a truck from point A to B?
It turns out it's really hard.
It's really hard. These industry, like software, at the end of the day, there's a lot of good things about software. Software makes things easier, but software can help coordinate things in the real world, but it cannot deal with all the complexity of real world objects, whether that be moving a box of chips from the factory through a warehouse, through a truck, to a store, into your mouth, or a handyman or handy woman who's got to like go to a site, assess all the things that could be unique to Chris or Anthony's HVAC system, get the exact parts they need, because you may need copper pipe, I may need PVC pipe to do to my water hookup, attach it, and then deal with a customer who may have varying levels of sophistication, and deal with this while there's, snow outside or rain outside. There may not be parking for your truck, because I live in Philadelphia. There's no street parking anywhere. That's really complex that a software can't necessarily solve. And therefore, a lot of people just aren't willing to deal with the brain damage of like suffering through that complexity.
Anthony, you investing $500 in Nick's business too?
No, what I'm looking forward to now that Nick brought it up, I'm looking forward to that personal potato chip feeder that's going to put potato chips in my mouth. That sounds kind of right.
It needs to be AI driven. It's got to be like
driven
AI potato chip. Exactly. If it doesn't say AI in the name, what's next for you, Nick? Are you obviously you're going to stay and operate this company for a while, but do you see yourself in the future? Do you want to start a company, or do you want to continue to be a professional operator? Kind of, the word that in your word, you're sort of a hired gun. You come in, you work with PE people. Those people that come in and like that's a skill. That's hard to develop those skills.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah. So look, I have no innate desire to be called a founder or CEO or anything like that. I did start a small hedge fund, and it did well for a while and then it failed. What I would say is I will start an organization, not because I want my name on the door to be called a founder, but when I discover that there's a real business need. I started a hedge fund because I figured out a really unique strategy for investing that nobody else had. And that's why I went and did it, not because I wanted to have my name on the door. Today, I don't see that opportunity where, hey, there's a business opportunity and I'm the right person to go run it. If I see that, sure, I'll go start an organization tomorrow. But until then, I'll continue doing what I'm really good at and enjoy, which is how do I take organizations that are doing well to the next level of their success?
What if I told you could no longer? Well, so I want to ask two questions. I'll close with that question. I've run into seasoned operators now 3 or 4 different times in my life that want to go do your job, that want to go in and be turnaround people, or want to go in and be, interim CEOs or interim CXOs in different organizations, really right the ship and then go on and do something different. It is kind of a fun and sexy job if you get good at it, particularly if you're kind of that more founder mentality and like to do turnaround, things like that. How did you get your job, or how would you recommend if Anthony wants to no longer be a podcaster and wants to go be a turnaround CEO? What advice would you give them?
Sure. Number one, demonstrate you understand how businesses work at a really, really deep level, right? Whether you do that because you're a great investor, whether you're, writing blog articles, whatever it is, demonstrate to people that you have this extreme competence of knowing how businesses work.
Like when you say that, my mind goes to, there is only one thing that matters in every business, which is the value exchange between you and the customer. It's a one-on-one exchange.
You're right about the value exchange. That's one part. But how does HR, how does finance, how does marketing, how does sales, how do unit economics all flow into enabling that value exchange?
Got it. So understanding the pieces that truly enable that one value exchange, and also understanding what's critical and what's not.
Right. Like McDonald's. Yeah. The value exchange is they put a burger in your mouth and you feel happier, and that's worth the $4 you paid for the burger because you got more than $4 of happiness. That's how the value is created. But a lot of effort went into assembling that burger and hiring the people, organizing the people, creating the branding, the franchise, the recipes, right? That's really complex. And that complexity is different in every business. That's number one. demonstrate you understand how the business works. Number two, as with many other opportunities, make sure somebody out there who is a decision maker is aware that you exist, because the opportunity may not be there today, but in like 3, 4, 5, 10 years, when they know, hey, this opportunity exists, and hey, I know Anthony's the guy who can do it, you're that first call. That's how a lot of the opportunities have arisen for me. I spent many, many years, like a decade plus on Wall Street, building the kind of a reputation that I understand businesses. Never really asked to be an operator. And then someday somebody gave me a call saying, and this has happened several times since, that, hey, we know you understand how businesses work, and we think you're the right guy for this opportunity, or right guy or right gal.
I want to ask a specific follow-up question. Did you go out and say to people in the investment community, private equity, VC, wherever you find those opportunities, hey, I would like an opportunity to run a company someday, keep me in mind?
I have more recently. Again, we're midway through this IdeaScale journey. I plan on being here for kind of many years to come, but I do want that call in 3 years or 10 years. And part of making that opportunity, availing myself to that opportunity, is now going to these people who are decision makers and saying, hey, I have a track record. I've turned around or grown 3 different companies. So I clearly have a repeatable process to do this. I'm not looking for anything now, but in 10 years, 5 years, 6 months, whatever it is, when that opportunity arises, I would like to be that first call.
I think it's such a critical thing, because I hear so many people, and I see this constantly, which is, I'm a brilliant business person, and people are just going to infer that through osmosis, right? Like, I know everything there is to know about operating a business because I've just been around the block and I'm, grizzled and all this sort of stuff, without ever taking a moment and saying, this is who I am, this is what I've done, and this is what I want to do in the future. Anthony, does that resonate? I see that so much about people not being explicit about what they want.
Everybody knows how to run a business in their own head.
Right.
Everybody has the idea that people should be asking me how to do this stuff. Yeah. So I don't think that's a unique point of view. It's track record matters quite a bit.
Yeah. And so, but taking that extra step and saying what you want, I want to ask, one sort of follow-up question on that, Nick, and we started with this, but let's try to wrap it up with this, which is, we talked about getting what you want is easy, knowing what you want is hard. That is a universal truism, and a lot of people spend time chasing things that they think they want or that society says that they should want, without ever really understanding. And the old joke being, be careful what you ask for, you may get it. What lens would you give advice to me, or what lens have you looked through in your own life to ensure that the thing that you're doing is really what you should be doing?
Oof, that's a really hard question. I'm
glad I finally stumped you. You've been firing pretty quick, man. I've been trying to ask good ones.
I'm going to punt on that, because that is a question better asked of a philosopher than of Nick Jain.
I disagree. So here's how I'll rephrase the hopefully answer. In your own life, how have you examined opportunities and decided whether or not they were the right opportunities for you, versus you clearly could have stayed in academics, you clearly could have stayed on Wall Street, but you've moved along to these different paths. Why and how did you weigh those opportunities?
Sure. So I was very fortunate that from a fairly young age, kind of my parents never pressured me to do anything. And what that meant is I was able to get a really good sense of what gives me joy and meaning in life. Right. And it's very simply, number one, I like doing math. Number two, I like building things. Number three, I like working with people. I'm an extrovert. I want to be around people. That's it. Right. So beyond that, I just, I don't live a fancy life. I don't need to have fancy cars or big houses. So I don't need a lot of money to live. So as long as I get to do something mathematical, as long as I'm building something, and as long as I'm getting to work with people, I'm very fortunate. And if something, whether job opportunity or personal thing, doesn't meet those 3 criteria, I'm very fortunate that I'll just say no and go to the next.
So you've had a solid lens of which to look through from a very young age.
Yeah, I was very fortunate in that respect.
Like, you did a work in carpentry. You said you did an apprenticeship in carpentry.
Yeah, so I grew up in a kind of working class community in Canada, and most of my high school classmates went into the trades. Although I knew I was college bound, everybody else was doing it. It was good money, so I actually got my apprenticeship done in carpentry.
That's amazing. What's the coolest thing you've built, either then or since? Like
I
physically
haven't really
built,
built
not
much
metaphorically.
since. The coolest thing I built, and this is not particularly impressive, but it's actually really hard. I built the mold for a concrete staircase during one of my summer jobs. It's very technical because you need stairs that are perfectly flat. You're going to pour heavy concrete, so it's got to be structurally
It's
sound.
gonna be really strong, right?
Yeah, and then it has to be like detachable because you can build forms in a way that like you can't rip out the wood later. It's embedded in the concrete, and then you're really in trouble.
That's it sounds like complex problem solving. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Let's do a speed round real quickly. This will be very
Okay.
quick and then we can wrap it up.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just going to ask your personal opinion on this stuff. You were starting a company. Would you bootstrap it? Would you get it funded?
Get it funded.
Move fast and break things or move carefully, methodically, incrementally?
Move fast and break things. Life is
You've
too
already
short.
answered this, but let's just do it for posterity. Data driven or gut feeling?
Data driven 100% of the time.
Product first or brand first?
Products. Brands are illusory. Products ultimately are valued by organizations or people.
Long-term vision or short-term wins?
Short-term wins. Long-term victories are just the summation of short-term outcomes.
I love it. What a fascinating conversation. Where can we find out more about you? Where can we connect? Where can we watch your, I'm going to say, meteor? How can we watch you do amazing things for the rest of your career?
Sure. 3 ways for me. If you want to get in touch with me, my easiest way is through LinkedIn. My name is Nick Jain. If you want to see random projects I'm working on, my personal website is nickjain.com. You can play Flappy Bird. You can see my real estate investment business, all sorts of random stuff. And then for IdeaScale, our website is ideascale.com. Our software, by the way, is completely free to teams or organizations less than 100 people. Literally no strings attached. So I encourage people to check it out.
I was saying this was going to be the last thing, but what is it that inspires you about these concept of ideas? Like, it's such an inspiring business.
The world is built out of ideas, right? And ideas come from all sorts of unexpected places. And I love working for a company where that's what our software does. It helps identify amazing ideas from, sometimes from people who you wouldn't give the time of day to. And that's really important.
Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Anthony, what do we have coming up? I believe we'll be on again tomorrow I'm going to say it's like 6 a.m. I don't know. It's early.
No, 4:30.
It's before my beauty sleep is over. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Tomorrow we're going to be talking with Scott Morris about the most important thing you can do it in we're looking at the startup and your first hire. So we're going to be talking about your very first hire when you're starting your own company. That'll be tomorrow. Nick, thank you so much for this is our first founder spotlight. We've you made it easy for us.
CEO spotlight.
Yeah, CEO spotlight.
Right, interesting person spotlight.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Everybody that's listening, thank you for tuning in. You can find us at howtofounder.com. Subscribe to us on YouTube or Apple Podcasts there. And that's it. Well, we'll see you next time. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Chris.